Okay, so today we're just going to do a little intro to photosynthesis. We're going to keep it pretty simple today, so we'll just talk kind of like the basics of what is photosynthesis. We'll talk about the overall reaction, and then next week we'll talk more in depth and get into like the nitty-gritty of photosynthesis. All right, so I just want to start with the basics. Okay, so photosynthesis, it's just the process in which light energy is converted into chemical energy. All right, so if you look at this equation here, you don't need to copy the equation down quite yet. In about 4 slides, we will go over this equation, so don't copy right now. The only thing I want you to have in your notes from this slide is photosynthesis is just the process where we take light energy, usually sunlight, and we convert it into chemical energy. I have carbohydrates in parentheses because one of the products is the C6H12O6, that is glucose. Glucose is a sugar, which is a carbohydrate. Okay, so when we produce chemical energy, it gets produced and stored in the carbohydrate or the glucose. All right, so now I want to talk about who does photosynthesis. Can every organism do it? And the answer is no. Okay, only autotrophs do photosynthesis. If you look at the notes on the slide, I am trying to bold the important words. Okay, so in your notes, you need autotrophs. If you know what an autotroph is, then you don't have to write anything else. Okay. If you need some reminders, you can use my quick reminder of self-feeder. Okay, or they can feed themselves, they produce their own energy. If self-feeders is enough to remind you of like, okay, an autotroph makes their own energy, then you can have that down. If you hear the word autotroph and you think nothing, like you have no idea what an autotroph is, then you need to get the full definition written down, where an autotroph is an organism that makes its own food. Okay. And our examples of autotrophs are plants and algae. All right, next I want to talk about where does photosynthesis happen. So photosynthesis happens in the chloroplast. So in your notes, you need chloroplast. Okay, so know that it happens in the chloroplast. You don't necessarily need like all the non-coded words. So chloroplasts are primarily found in. If you look at this picture up here, this is like a microscopic slide showing you the chloroplast in the leaves. So each of those green dots there are the chloroplasts. And then down below, that is a big picture of a chloroplast. So that is like a computer generated. The whole thing itself is a chloroplast, so it kind of looks like a little green bean. And it's not like the food green bean, it's like a bean shape and it's green. Next week, we will talk about like what are the little substructures inside. But for today, you just need to know photosynthesis happens inside the chloroplast. And inside chloroplasts, they have pigments. The pigments are what actually absorb the energy from light, or the energy from the sun. So the most popular one that most plants that has the most abundance is chlorophyll. So chlorophyll, it absorbs all of the wavelengths of light except green. It reflects green. And what color do most plants look like to you? Green. Okay. That's why. So when the sunlight hits the leaves, the chlorophyll absorbs all of those wavelengths of energy except green. It reflects the green. That's why you and I see plants use green. Now, there are more pigments in plants than just chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is like the most abundant in the majority of plants. Another popular one is like carotene. So carotene is the dominating pigment in like carrots or sweet potatoes. So what color wavelength do you think carotene reflects?
Darker kind of color.
Yes, darker. What color are sweet potatoes in carrots? Orange. Okay. So like carotene is a pigment. It absorbs all of the wavelengths of some of that dark orange. All right. So finally, I want to look at photosynthesis as a whole. So here's the entire reaction for photosynthesis. You need to copy this entire slide down. Okay, so this slide has a lot of important info. Okay. So we have the entire reaction. This first line has the chemical equation. And then right below it, I have the words, just in case you aren't familiar with those chemical formulas, it has the words. And it's also balanced, so you'll see the numbers like 6 CO2, just know that 6 is in there to balance it. So the overall reaction for photosynthesis is 6 CO2, or carbon dioxide, plus 6 H2O, which is water, yields, so this arrow up here, it means yields or it makes, and it makes C6H12O6, which is also called glucose, and 6 oxygen molecules, which is O2. So in your notes, you need to have both of those. So have the chemical formulas and the words. Okay, so you need to know carbon dioxide and water combined to make glucose and oxygen. And then just some vocab kind of down there on the bottom. Anything to the left of this arrow are called reactants. So these go into the reaction. And then anything to the right of this arrow, these are called products, and these are what are made in the reaction. So carbon dioxide and water are used up. Glucose and oxygen are produced. All right, so as we learn about photosynthesis, next week we're going to get way more in detail. So the chemical reactions we look at, they're going to get more complicated. We don't have to become an expert on every little step during photosynthesis, but we do need to know the main ideas, and we're especially interested in these inputs and the outputs. So you absolutely have to know this reaction up here. Okay, so make sure you star it, you underline it, you highlight it. You absolutely have to know that in photosynthesis, carbon dioxide and water are used, and they're going to produce glucose and oxygen. All right, so now, the overall goal of photosynthesis is to take energy from light and turn it into chemical energy or glucose. So in order to do that, energy is required. So in order to do photosynthesis, you have to have energy. So we're not going to write down everything on this slide, but we're going to write down something. You've got what you need to have. So you do need to know photosynthesis requires energy. You need to know that ATP is a molecule that stores that energy. And you need to know that ATP, it's like a rechargeable battery. You don't need to write anything else after that. On the next slide, I will tell you what I mean by ATP being a rechargeable battery. Okay, so let me explain what I mean by ATP is like a rechargeable battery. So here on the left, this is the same diagram the notes yesterday into that. So this cycle between ATP and ATP. So when we start with ATP, the T stands for tri, or 3, and the P stands for phosphate, so there's 3 phosphates here. When water is added, the ATP becomes hydrolyzed, and the bond between the second and the third phosphate is going to break. So the third phosphate is detached from the molecule. When this happens, energy is released. Okay, so that energy is used in the cell for whatever cellular process that cell is going through. So then, if you lose that third phosphate, ATP becomes ADP. Okay, so down here at the bottom, it's ADP. D stands for di, which is 2, and the P is still phosphate. So if you see down here, there's only 2 phosphate groups. So now if we relate it to the charged and dead battery, so if we look at the diagram on the right, when it's ATP and it has the 3 phosphate groups, it's unstable, so it has energy to give off when that bond is broken. So think of it as like a charged battery. When you add water, you lose a phosphate group, you lose energy, it becomes ADP, ADP is stable and it has no extra energy to give. Think of it as a dead battery. Now, it can be charged up again though. So all you need to do is add energy, like from food or the sunlight, and that extra energy is going to allow that third phosphate to rebond, and ADP becomes ATP. So this is a never-ending cycle in your cells. ATP is constantly changing between ADP and back to ATP, just like you charge your cell phone. So how many of you charge your phone at least once a day? Everyone, right? So you like to start your day with a charged battery. As you use it, your battery dies, you charge it again. Okay? So just like your phone and your phone battery is a never-ending cycle, so is ATP and ATP in your body. So ATP is the most common, most popular molecule we talk about storing energy, but it's not the only one. So the last thing I want to talk about today is just one other molecule that also stores energy. So another molecule that stores energy is called NADPH. I just want to introduce the name today. And then next week, when we talk more about photosynthesis in depth, we'll talk more about what NADPH does. But you do need this, it stores energy. So you need to have, it stores energy. And it's referred to as an electron carrier. Next week, as we look more into the specific processes of photosynthesis, we'll see how it transfers electrons to other substances. But for today, I just want you to be familiar with the name and know that it also stores energy and it carries electrons.